that either it's the AB 2588, the hotspot, is that the one that addresses the quality of the equipment that would be brought in? Or is it 42 that is operative here with regard to the kind of equipment that you have to anticipate will be on site, and yet you're not going to have equipment on site until, when people talk about cutting edge, your cutting edge is my razor kind of model. So how do you ascertain that, given the fact that probably the model you have is coming from non-cutting edge operating facilities? What's the geographic range? What's the number of cases do you review or would be reviewing in order to be talking about whether or not the equipment is turning out or would turn out a certain level of pollution or a certain amount of chemical particles and so on and so forth? So how do you standardize that in such a way that it has a kind of authority in this abstract? If you say you're going to have a cutting edge operation, then it should be certainly pretty good. But on the other hand, if and what kind of authority would we have to ensure that what you reviewed becomes the standard that is in fact put on the ground at some future time?
Well, there's a couple of questions inside there,
yeah,
so I'll try to do them one at a time. The permit application that the applicant signs and gives to us is binding. When he says he's going to buy, just make up a name, the Acme 550, 500 ton per hour unit, he has to get that exact unit. If we go onto the site at a later date and find out it's a 750 or it's a 420, guess what? You're shut down, notice of violation, permit suspension. Okay. We got to start over. It has to be exact, and we spend a lot of time. Particularly diesel engines are very difficult because they will buy a generator, for example, that's a 2007 generator, but the engine happened to be produced in 2005 and sat on the shelf for 2 years. So it's actually not a 2007 when you actually read the manufacturer's plate. So there's a lot of this stuff that goes on. The way the EIR is structured, and Leonard, you can chime in as well, the EIR basically sets a cap, and it says emissions are not going to be above this level. If they are above this level as a mitigation measure, it says the air district will require a supplemental or addendum. Unfortunately, the applicant is sort of in a bind, I think, and maybe they can address that. They can't actually pick out equipment and reserve it, 2 or 3 years before the project hits the ground. So they can't give us an equipment list. There was this discussion, I believe it's in the agenda, in the addendums, about an Aztec plant. That data goes back to 2004 when they were looking at the Kiewit site in Ukiah. There may be better technology out there. There may be a different plant that they choose to buy. So what we do with AP 42, which is the EPA document, AP 42 is basically all of the aggregation of information that you talked about sources nationwide. It basically takes all that information and says this is a standard generic asphalt plant. It can be 50 years old, it can be 70 years old, it can be put in last week. This is what the emissions will be on average. And average isn't the right term because they actually do look a lot at worst case. One of the issues that we dealt with a lot on this project and is in the air quality analysis that's in the agenda or in the addenda is the issue of potential to emit. When we issue a permit and we review a project, we look at what's called PTE, potential to emit. That is the plant operating basically without restrictions. Because we have no way of saying until we have a permit what kind of restrictions there are going to be. So when you analyze the air emissions for this project, I think we used 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, or did we use 6 days a week, 8 hours a day? The asphalt plant itself will not operate that long. I can say that for a fact because there isn't a demand in this county for that level of material. Even if the Willits bypass was built entirely out of asphalt, you wouldn't run that long. When we were conversing with the applicant about this again several years ago, we said, you need to accept some kind of limitation. Because if you aren't willing to accept a limitation, you're going to end up as a Title V source, as a Masonite or Georgia Pacific. And what the EIR does is it basically puts a cap that says you will stay below that threshold. And there are virtually no asphalt plants that have to meet the air standards that we have to meet in this county that are permitted as Title V sources. They would be permitted as a major source. It would be a source that we would report to the federal government. It would be subject to EPA inspection as well as inspection from us, as well as Air Resources Board. There would be a very high level of review of the project. But it is, I think, very critical that we have a functioning hearing board, because that's the opportunity for the citizens to give input to the Air District directly. And of course, they can also send us letters. We've been receiving letters, as I said, on this project, but we don't have an application to put with those letters. We don't have any action that we're contemplating at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does that conclude your concerns?
Is that at the moment?
At the moment, sure. Supervisor Pinches.
Yeah, Chris, all equipment placed anywhere in the county, not only at the proposed project, but has to meet federal and state air quality standards. So
Right.
you're just talking about the cumulative effect, right, really? I mean, individual piece of equipment have to meet, so you're talking about the
Right.
cumulative effect of the emissions output, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, so how at that site, I've seen times when the CHP has 15 or 20 trucks stop there weighing them and all the trucks are idling. And in the summertime when there's a lot of freight going up and down Highway 101. So how do you take just the area impacts of this project, or the proposed project, and separate that from the other, you know, it's not fair to lump that all together at that
Right.
location, you know? I mean, how is that done? Or can you do it? I
Yeah.
just don't think it's fair to any project throughout the county to be included in an area to where they're, you know, I mean, rightfully so, there's studies that say that 35% of our bad air comes from China. So are they going to be penalized for China's air? You know, I mean, it's an important issue to me. I don't want to see our business people in this county hurt for something that they're not contributing to.
The hotspots monitoring, not monitoring, the hotspots reporting that was done, or should say the health risk reporting that was done, considered local topography and wind direction. Yes, that information was based on our monitors right down near Remco. That data was accepted by the U.S. court system as accurate. I think that's probably why it was used. It's certainly better than the default, which is usually Ukiah, the bottom of the canyon. But we don't, Leonard can address this more, but we don't look at the impacts off-site when we look at a project like this, other than some of the truck traffic that's directly related to the site. The general growth in the area, the cumulative growth is addressed in the growth-inducing impacts and the cumulative impact section of the EIR, and those aren't assigned to the applicant, because in a lot of cases that growth would occur anyway.
So when the CHP puts up the sign that says all trucks stop at Scales Ahead, and there's 20 trucks backed up there idling, that don't matter, huh? That
Doesn't matter. I mean, you know, we do have.
I mean, it matters.
It matters. I mean, we have enforcement authority over those vehicles, and if they're putting out too much smoke, we can go over and cite them. CHP can do that as well.
But the cumulative effect that has, say, having 20 trucks there idling the way it get weighed is a good or greater effect is something else.
It would definitely be an effect. Yeah, how good and, you know, how it relates to the plant would be
I just
hard
want
for
to
me
get that on the record. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Pinches. Other comments from the board? We're taking comments today. We're not making decisions on approval or disapproval of the draft environmental impact report. This is comment only. I'll go over the time frame a little bit so people can formulate maybe some concerns. Today we're taking public comment and comments from the